Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our attendees from around the world. I'm Naomi Moyer, Head of Professional Development here at Oxford. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to ELTOC. We are thrilled to have you with us here today. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. Whether you're a private tutor or a school teacher, or you're looking for resources and ideas for your team of educators, we have an exciting and informative programme in store for you. Over the next few hours, we will hear from leading experts in English language teaching. They will share insights on trends and best practices. And in our panel discussions, we will discuss leading pressing issues that affect teachers today. And of course, there'll be plenty of opportunities to ask questions and share your experiences. So get ready to be inspired, to connect, learn and grow. Thank you once again for joining us.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another ELTOC. It's amazing how many people have already joined us for today's live stream. So thank you for joining us and welcome. This is the point where you can say hi to me in the chat box if you've been to ELTOC before. You'll know that I'm Sean and I'm the person that moderates us through today. Although I'll be joined by a wonderful team of people, including Katie, who you'll see very shortly. And as you'll know, this broadcast is just one of the services that Oxford University Press offers to teachers. But before we really get going, I should remind you, of course, that Oxford University Press is the world's authority on the English language, which I can't now say, apparently. As part of the University of Oxford, it is committed to furthering English learning worldwide, and it continuously brings together expertise, experience, and research to create resources, helping millions of us and helping millions of learners to achieve their potential. So welcome to Oxford. Thank you, whoever said nice to see me again. It's always great to be back. It is a beautifully sunny day here in Oxford, and I am so excited to be part of ELTOC Chapter 6. We've got an amazing block coming up for you over the next few hours, with the first of our sessions kicking off at the top of the hour. Hi, Hannah. Nice to see you. Hi, Myra. How are you doing? So if you want to pop in the chat box where you're coming from in your social media channel, and of course if you're liking what's happening, then please do hit those relevant buttons on your social media channel. I want to see lots of love hearts and thumbs up as we're going through the day. Now, you might notice above my head, just over there, you can see a QR code. So this is it's a good time before we start to actually zap that QR code on your mobile device. That is going to give you links to everything that we're going to be talking about today. So you'll find out how to get your certificate from there, which I'll talk about in a moment. Hi, Mary. Nice of you to join us. So I'll talk about the certificate in a moment, but you'll also see links to position papers and other things that we'll talk about throughout the next few hours as we bring you block 1 of Chapter 6 of ELTOC. So I'm sure many of you are curious about getting a certificate. So do bear in mind that certificates of attendance are available for the whole of this ELTOC Chapter 6 event, but you must claim them within the next 48 hours, okay? So to claim your certificate, click on the link that will come through the comments or in your QR code, claim your certificate link, submit your details, and then you will get a certificate of attendance. And you can see that flashing up on the screen as I talk about now. Okay, so they are available till Monday, so don't delay. When you've got a moment, go and click on that link, fill in, give in your details, and you will get a certificate. So you've got 48 hours to do that. And if you miss that link, if you check your social media, there where you are now. I say that because we're going live on Facebook, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. So look on your social media. You will see that the moderators have provided a link for you in there to those resources. And don't forget also that this is only one of two blocks of ELTOC. We always have a number of blocks. For ELTOC Chapter 6, there are two blocks. So you're with me and Katie until about 2:30, 3 o'clock UK time this afternoon. And then at 1:45 UTC in the morning, if you're in my time, so 1:45 UTC, there is the second block. And if you want to see what's in the second block, go over to the ELTOC website, look at the schedule, and set a reminder. And in my case, set an alarm clock. Because it's broadcast on social media, you don't have to sign up. You know, sometimes we do these in a webinar room, and sometimes we do them on social media. So this is the social media one. So you're not limited. All you've got to do is remind yourself to come and joining those talks. And if you want to see that schedule, then do go to the website, have a look. Again, the links are going through there. We have an amazing team that click faster than I speak. Hi there. So, Sidra, you are here, so don't worry about not having an email. You've got everything you need now, okay? That's all you need. Strap yourself in and get ready to join us. So if you are on Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn, just join in the comments. You can interact with us in the box. You can see that from time to time we flash up the comments on the screen. If you do have a question for the speakers as we talk, do drop it into your comment box, and we have the team ready to grab that question. Just bear in mind there are so many of you joining us that you might not get your question answered. But if you do drop it in, or you do have a comment that you want to have, put it into that social media box, and we will try and deal with it. We'll certainly see it, and hopefully we can answer it. As I said, during the conference, we'll be giving you offers and session-related resources. There will be banners coming on the screen. You'll see them in the comment box, and there is that QR code for that. So we're 5 minutes away from the first session. So now it's time to get that drink filled, get yourself comfortable. You can always tell us what you're eating and drinking with it. And I'm curious, because now I can watch the chat box properly. I'm curious to know how many of you have been, or how many ELTOCs you've been to already. So do drop those in the box. I saw before we went live, somebody said they'd been to 6, which is a pretty good record. All right, 4 minutes to go. So I'm going to bring in my marvelous co-host for the day, who's going to lead us into the first session. So good morning, Katie. Are you there? Yes, you are. Hi, Katie.
Hello, Sean. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
It's lovely to be back at another ELTOC. How is
Right.
everyone doing?
I'm going to hand over to you, yeah?
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Sean. So I have the great pleasure of introducing our first speakers. Who's excited? Hit those likes and love buttons now if you're excited for the first talk of Chapter 6. So first up, we have the wonderful Hayo Reinders and Dr. Lin Fung joining us to tell us everything we need to know about self-regulated learning. Hayo is a TESOL professor, director of research, and a professor of applied linguistics. He is founder of the Global Institute for Teacher Leadership and editor of Innovation in Language Learning and Teaching. He has published over 26 books and 150 articles in areas such as out of the class learning, technology, and language teacher leadership. And then he's also joined by Lynn. Lynn is the director of the English language program at Chatham University in Pittsburgh. She is also founder of EduLink International, which offers English materials and online instructional services to students in any location. She has peer-reviewed articles published in a variety of education and language journals and is co-author of the book Studies in English: Strategies for Success in Higher Education. So I'm going to bring Hayo and Lynn onto the screen now. Bear with me a second. Hello, Hayo.
Hi, how are you,
And
Katie?
hello, Lynn. I'm good,
Hi,
thank you. How are
everyone.
you both? Are you good? Are you ready to get going with chapter 6?
Absolutely ready, 100%.
Perfect. So I'm going to let you get right into it. But before, I just wanted to remind everyone watching to add their questions to the comments, and I'll do my best to pop up during the session and ask Hayo and Lynn some of these. If we can get round to them. We might not get round to all of them, but we'll try our best. So Hayo and Lynn, just to get us started, I wanted to leave you with hopefully an easy question. We wondered, what is self-regulated learning and why is it so important? If I leave you to answer that question, and I'll pop back later. Thank you very much. See you later, everyone.
See you later, Katie. Well, thank you for that very, very easy question. It's not actually all that easy to define something as broad and important as self-regulated learning in a short amount of time. But for me personally, I think self-regulated learning, honestly, is about giving learners agency, about helping learners to develop the skills and attitudes and self-belief and confidence really to take control over their own learning and to help them essentially prepare them for the future. That is not an academic definition, but that is, to me personally, what it means. What do you think, Ling? Does that resonate with you?
Yes, I totally agree. And I often reflect on my own English language learning experience. I learned English in Vietnam, and I actually wrote a small article about my own English learning experience, reflecting on motivation and success. And at that time, I used the word self-direction. And I had big goals. I was motivated. I was engaged. I made a lot of efforts in my learning. But looking back, there was something missing. I focused too much on exams instead of focusing on improving communication at that time. So that attitude and that orientation to the language is also important.
Yeah, and you mentioned already, Ling, self-directedness, and I think it's worth clarifying for the audience because it can be very confusing. That there is, of course, a plethora of terminology. There's lots of different words being used to describe what is often the same or similar things. So, when we talk about self-regulated learning or self-directed learning, independent learning, autonomous learning, and a whole range of other ones, they are perhaps in some cases slightly different, but they all, I think what they have in common is that two things. One, they place the focus first and foremost on the learner. And I think that is a really, really key characteristic of all of these different terms. And secondly, they place the focus very heavily on the future and learners' readiness to deal with, the challenges and pleasures of language learning in a variety of different contexts, both inside the classroom, both outside of the classroom, both now as well as perhaps later in their lives.
Yeah, definitely. And I can see that self-regulation is very important, in particular for language learning, because as you all know, it is such a long process and sometimes it's a tedious process. So it's really necessary to have this high motivation, but also good habits and engagements in the process. Otherwise, there's no way that we can develop a high level of English proficiency as well as any other languages here.
Yeah, Ling and I, we obviously we know each other quite well, and we've worked together in the past, and we know from each other that we're quite self-regulated, and so we kind of intuitively see and value the importance of helping learners to regulate their own learning. But when you look at, for example, research and the academic literature on self-regulation, you see that it's not just something that maybe teachers are interested in or that sounds like it might be a good idea, but there is a lot of evidence going back decades, like many decades, from different fields, from psychology, educational studies, language education, that so very, very clearly shows that learners' ability to regulate their own learning is one of the, and some might even argue, the most important contributor to long-term academic success. And how we define academic success, we might be able to discuss a little bit more later. But I think it's really worth emphasizing here. It's not just an idea that might appeal to some teachers. It has been established to be one of the most reliable predictors of who in your class will likely be successful in whatever that they are trying to learn in the future. And so that leaves us as teachers with a really, really fantastic opportunity, because if we know that, well, the next obvious question is, what are we going to do to help learners to become better self-regulated learners?
Mm-hmm. And operational, you may think about self-regulation to include setting goals, setting good goals, monitor learning process, manage the learning process, as well as using strategies and resources to be successful at language learning.
Yeah, there's a lot of different components. Now, I see that there's a lot of comments coming through in the chat, and Katie and the team at OUP are very kindly scrolling through all your questions. We can't really keep an eye on it, Ling and I, but they are actually passing on, or will be passing on, some of your questions and comments to us. So if we're not responding to them immediately, know that they are being read, and that they will be coming to us, and will be responding to your queries as we go along. Hey, but Ling, what do you think? You've already mentioned some of the practical components, shall we say, of self-regulated learning, because it's easy to continue to talk about the theory and the research, and all of that, of course, is important. But I think a lot of people listening and watching, and I know that I certainly would if I was, are wondering, well, how, what does it do? What does it look like in practice? As a teacher, what can I do? And I'm just wondering, Ling, what you think. Maybe we could talk the audience through the framework, through the pedagogical framework, and then briefly stop at each of the key stages. What do you think?
Yeah, we can show the first slide in terms of what teachers can.
Yes. So we have a very professional team in the background. So if you could please go to, that's the one. All right, maybe Ling, I can take the first one, and then maybe we can just alternate. What do you think?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So for everybody watching, you'll see on the screen part of the framework that Ling and Nathan Thomas and myself, together with OUP, with Fleur, developed as part of the position paper that we'll send a link to you for later. But the framework broadly consists of two parts. There's the top half, which relates to the wider context, the school and the country, and rules and regulations that might be in place around education. And then the bottom half of the framework, which is the one that you're seeing on the screen right now, specifically focuses on what we can do as teachers in the classroom. And before we go through it, it's worth pointing out that what this framework does essentially is break down the self-regulated learning process, because as you can probably imagine, self-regulation is not just one thing that you do on one occasion or one activity that you complete, but it's a series of skills and steps or stages, whatever you want to call them, that you have to go through in order to be successful as a learner, to regulate your own learning. And so as teachers, we can break this process down, and we can identify each of these different stages, and we can make sure that learners understand each of them. So rather than presenting everything at once, especially with maybe younger learners or learners who are really new to self-regulated learning, it's actually much easier to understand if you go through the self-regulation process step by step. So the first step, if you look at the top left, it says motivation for SRL. And this is a step that a lot of teachers skip, often without even realizing it. I used to do this myself as well, but it's really important to help learners to understand why they should be investing time and energy on developing self-regulated learning skills, right? Because a lot of learners, especially for those to whom it's new, if you start talking about self-regulation, they may not understand why you're not just teaching them and why you are asking them to do things that they might not have done before. And so explaining the rationale, showing that successful learners are self-regulated learners, or perhaps even bringing in a more senior student, or if you're teaching older students, maybe bringing in somebody who has graduated and has become successful in a job, and having them come into your class and explain how they have become successful and how it relates to their ability to self-regulate their learning can be really, really motivating. But whichever way you do it, step number one, make sure your learners understand the rationale for self-regulated learning. Ling, do you want to take us on to the next step?
And also the next step is to identify needs. Learners may have some ideas about what they want to achieve, but sometimes they may not know their strengths and weaknesses. So walking them through this process may help them to also understand what their needs are. But I want to talk a little bit more about setting goals, because everyone understands that setting goals is important, but sometimes we don't spend time doing it. And in our paper, as well as in my own personal experience, what I usually do is to have really specific handouts to hand out to students so that they know how to set goals. And one of the techniques that I have been using is called the WHOOP technique, and maybe we can talk more about that later on as well. Setting relevant goals is very important, but making plans together with the goals is even more important, because the day-to-day engagements really are necessary for language learning. So what does WHOOP here stand for? It stands for wishes, your vision of what you want to be, your wishes. And then you need to also think about the outcomes. So what are the outcomes that can come from these wishes? But immediately after thinking of the outcomes, students, or we need to think about obstacles. That's another O in the technique here. They need to contrast what their wishes are with the obstacles that they may encounter along the way, so that they can make plans to overcome the obstacles. And the plans have to be really specific for them to really engage in action, and for the plans to drive action. So those are some of the steps in my experience that are really important to help students to get started. And we can talk more about task regulation here as well, because as teachers, I'm sure that you are engaged in developing tasks and engaging learners in performing tasks. So this is maybe not something too unfamiliar to you. And personally, my research is in task-based language teaching. So I think that this comes naturally, but we have to step back and also take students to look at the bigger picture in terms of motivation and setting goals. Hayo?
Yeah, I like how you've connected the identifying needs and goals and plans. They all sort of have to come together, right? And I think it's worth pointing out to the audience before we move on to task regulation that this is something that, in my experience, is very new to most learners. Because if you think about it, most learners, of course, are used to being told what their needs are, right? The curriculum tells you what you're supposed to learn, when, and where, and which class, etc. The exams and the tests and the feedback from the teacher tells you what your strengths and weaknesses are. And out of that, a set of goals is identified, usually by the teacher or the school for the course or the semester or whatever the case may be. But now if you flip that on its head and say, well, you know what? Let's start from you. Let's start from the learner. What do you actually need and want? And the WHOOP method that Ling just described to us, is similar. It starts from this idea of, well, what do you wish for? That WOOP, right? And that's quite what's the word I'm looking for? That's quite liberating for learners. Is that, oh, hold on, actually, yeah, I can think about what I would like to do in the future and who I want to be. And then suddenly what happens in class kind of makes some personal sense to them, right? Similarly with the setting goals, you mentioned WHOOP as one approach. I think many of the people in the audience will be familiar with SMART goals, goals that are specific and measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. It doesn't, in a way, matter so much what approach you use, but what is important is that learners start to see that even if it's not immediately, that over time, they will be responsible for managing these aspects of their learning. You are not going to always be there as a teacher. They're not always going to be in your school, and therefore they need to learn how to identify their needs, set their goals, and make the day-to-day plans to learn successfully. Ling, I was wondering if you could perhaps talk us one more time briefly through the white circle, the task regulation.
Yeah. So for me, engaging in language learning activities is what drives language development, right? Students need to use the language. And I mentioned before about my language learning experience that I focused so much on preparing for the exam. But what about other skills? So as teachers, I think that one of our important goals is to develop tasks for language learning. And students may also encounter a lot of language learning tasks. However, sometimes they actually don't teachers actually play a big role in selecting resources and introducing resources to students, and from then on maybe we can guide them towards exploration and also select other resources for themselves. In addition, apart from learning hard, it's good to also know strategies to learn smart. So applying strategies for task regulation is also beneficial for successful task performance. And they also need to know how to monitor progress, to know whether they perform the task well and what they learn from the task. So reflection and self-monitoring are also really good part of what drives language development. So what I can see here is actually it is kind of the core of language development, but we can also help students to look broader and regulate their learning in a broader sense as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think you really took something very complex and made it very understandable. I hope the audience agrees, but absolutely. And again, this is something that, as you already pointed out, Ling, we always as teachers have the tendency to go in there with the best intentions, right? And say, well, these are great materials, use this, or, here are ways in which you can study, or, or give them feedback to monitor progress. But actually, again, over time, at least, learners will need to know how to do this. Ling, you're a few years younger than me, but you will probably also still remember when in the early days of the internet, people were saying, oh, learners now have access to unlimited resources, etc. And now we're seeing similar sort of claims being made about artificial intelligence, etc. But just because there's a lot of resources out there doesn't mean that learners know which ones are appropriate, which ones are relevant to them, which ones are, at the right level. And so suddenly, as a learner, even though you potentially have access to all these materials, the need to make informed, critical, digital literacy choices becomes even more important. And so for us as teachers, that means we need to help learners and guide them along and show them, preferably in class in a safe environment, how to do that. So that task regulation, selecting resources, applying strategies, figuring out whether you're actually making any progress as a learner, as you say, Ling, is absolutely one of the key components, isn't it? Which leads us on to the final one. Do you want to take that one, Ling?
Self-assessment?
Yeah.
Yes. Also, I already mentioned reflection as part of language learning, and I see self-assessment as a way for learners to think about their own performance, to assess where they are in the learning process. And this also gives them motivation for self-related learning. And you can do this step by step as well, in the sense that when in the classroom with the task, there may be criteria for performance, and then later on students can reflect on that experience and also assess their own task performance. But in a bigger context, they may also assess where they are in the learning process, what kind of learner they are, what their learning style is. So I see this as supporting in all of the steps in the self-regulation process here.
Yeah, well said. And what this does, and I think this is a key takeaway for those of you listening, you might think, oh, well, that's a pretty graph, and I see the different components. I get what you mean about the individual bits. The terminology and the and so on don't really matter so much, and we're certainly not saying that this is the framework and you need to follow this or something like that. However, what I will say, and I think Ling will agree with me here, but let me know if you don't, is that firstly, it is a process. And that means that after a period of learning or studying, could be weeks, could be months, and after reflection and self-assessment, the whole process starts again. Because maybe you find as a learner that, well, I've been studying here in this course with teacher Ling for 6 months now. You reflect on your learning and you identify, well, actually my needs have changed because I'm taking different classes now, or I'm going to go to a different school, or I'm soon going to take up my first job. So maybe my goals and my plans need to change as well. So it is a cycle, it's a process. And the second component, which to me is the most important, is that for those of you listening and watching, it almost doesn't matter which framework you use, but I do implore you to use a framework so that what you do in class is systematic, so that it allows you to keep track of what you have shown your learners and when. Because the mistake that I made earlier in my career was that I would get very excited about, I don't know, goal setting, right? And I would dedicate a lot of time to just that, but not having talked about motivation or identifying needs, or not following it up with talking about making plans. So, if you do have a structure, then you can make a systematic plan, and you can say, well, in this part of the semester, I'm going to make sure that we do this, and then I'm going to follow it up with that, and then I'm going to check that they understand the next part, etc. And then by the end of the semester, you will have covered all of it, right? Does that make sense, Ling? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, that's such a good point. That there are a lot of demands for different skills and different skills that we need to teach, but systematic to me is the key word here. And this model that we have here can remind teachers of being systematic in helping students to self-regulate.
Yeah, it's sort of the heart. I'm just thinking out loud here, but it's sort of the heart of self-regulation is that systematicity, right? The whole point of regulating, I mean, the word itself already implies it, is that there is a regularity, that there is a system as a learner, but you need to develop as a learner that system, and you need to know what the different components are. And as teachers, we need to guide learners along to start to recognize that, not by overloading them with too much information and putting too many demands on them from the beginning, but by gradually introducing this so that they can incorporate it into their own thinking. Now, I see there's a lot of comments. I can see a very large number in the top right hand side of my screen, but we can't see the questions that you're posting at the moment. So to the OUP team, if you feel that there are questions that are very relevant to what we're talking about, please feel free to just put them into a banner so we can respond to them there. Katie is back with us. Have you got any feedback, comments, questions?
I've got a couple of questions that have come in that are quite interesting. So we have one here, I'll put that on screen. Do you think it works with learners of lower and higher proficiency levels? And if it does, wouldn't it be like steering learners' attention off the topic, the language? So that was just a quick question there. I wondered if you'd be able to answer that. I'll hide that so we can see Lynn.
Yeah, good question. Ling, do you want to try that, or would you like me to?
So let's see. I'm trying to process the question in terms of taking off the language or off topic.
Well, I think the person asking the question is perhaps worried that if we focus a lot of time and energy in class on these, well, what are essentially not directly language-related tasks, that there will be less time to actually teach the language, right?
But that's a good point in the sense that the time in the classroom is never enough. Right? So by teaching students to regulate their learning, our hope is that they can learn more beyond the classroom. They can make decisions. They are more motivated. They are more engaged. And to me, that is really necessary. To me, the time in the classroom is never enough. So this is like giving them the tools so that they can learn beyond the classroom as well. And in terms of younger learners and older learners, I think that it is important for both groups, but perhaps for younger learners as well. Think about your child. We would want to teach them to be disciplined, to be able to do things on their own, and we have to show them how. So I would think that it is suitable for both groups of learners here.
Yeah, well said.
Thank you. Another question we've had here from Aleda, I hope I pronounced that name right. She's asked, what strategies, tools can we suggest students use for the self-evaluation process?
Yeah. So there are a lot of well, first we need to, I think, clarify. There's the monitoring progress that we talked about just now in the framework, and then there is self-assessment. And I'm not entirely sure which one this question asks about, but I think they are similar. So the monitoring progress is what you do as a learner during or immediately after completing a task. Right. So let's say that you're doing, I don't know, a role play in the classroom, or you have a discussion or something like that. Obviously, that there's a learning outcome that is intended there. And while you're doing it, you might, or after you've just done it, you might ask yourself, hey, how did that go? How did I do in this discussion? Oh, it wasn't that good. Why? Was it my pronunciation? Was it because I was lacking the vocabulary? So there's a little bit of reflection going on. So you might say, okay, well, maybe next time when I do this, I should have some key words on the table before I start the discussion, right? So that's sort of an example of monitoring progress. But self-assessment is broader. It's where every week or month or even every year, you kind of look back and you said, well, these were the big goals that I had for this course or this term. And I said that I would achieve X, Y, and Z. Well, how have I done? Am I actually on my way to meeting those goals? So I think that's an important distinction between these two. Ling, I'm sure you've got some examples of ways in which that self-assessment can be done.
Yeah, you touched upon different levels of assessment, right? Students can reflect on their task performance. Perhaps they have checklists from teachers first and their own checklist. And at the proficiency level, they may also self-assess the proficiency level in terms of what they can do. In terms of ability to self-regulate, we can also give them some scale for them to reflect on whether their level is low or high. And actually, our position paper has that survey or that scale that you may use. So I encourage you to think of a self-assessment at different levels as well. And the key here is to engage learners in doing that more. And Hayo also mentioned another really easy tool is journaling, right? Reflecting journaling.
Yeah, and learning diaries, learning journals, portfolios, of course, whether they are written down or e-portfolios online. In a way, I wouldn't say that it doesn't matter at all what tools you use, but in a way, it doesn't matter so much. The key here is that reflective process. It is encouraging learners to stop what they're doing. And that might just be for 1 minute if it's part of a task, or it might be, a longer period of time if it's part of the self-assessment. But stop and think and ask yourself, how was this for me? What went well here? What didn't go well? Why not? What could I do differently next time? Who might be able to help me to do it better next time? Maybe that's the teacher, maybe that's a friend, maybe that's a family member. It's those types of questions that are absolutely vital. And whether you write them down in a diary or portfolio is perhaps of secondary importance. But most importantly, you as a teacher, you encourage your learners to reflect. And we haven't talked about this yet, but maybe we should also tell your students, or show your students, that you recognize the time and energy that they spend on this type of reflective activity. Right? Because if, as a learner, I don't know, if let's say I keep a learning diary and I write in it every day, and then my teacher never looks at it, or it doesn't actually have any impact on my course grades, for example, right? Then why would I do it, right? But if the teacher says, okay, you got a, I don't know, B+ for your in terms of your language development, but in terms of your reflection, your ability to see where you went wrong, and your ability to make better new plans, you did really well. So for that, you get an A+. Then your average grade shouldn't be a B+, right? It should be something like an A- or whatever the case may be. So that recognition is incredibly important, I would say.
Yeah.
Can I share something that I'm excited about AI? And you're going to have an AI session after this. So there are a lot of applications of AI, but I'm more excited about having students produce language in written in the written mode or the oral mode, and then have it transcribed for you and correct for you. But that's not enough. Then students need to look at it to see what they did well and that what they need to improve. And then teachers can also step in and look at that with them. that's what I have been doing a little bit with AI. And to me, it's just the principle of noticing, right? For learning, reflection, and intentional as well.
Definitely. Another question we had for you, Lynn, was about the WHOOP method. And could you explain a little bit more about it?
Yeah, I wrote a little blog post about that. But basically, if you can remember what it stands for, perhaps you will remember it. W stands for wish. What you wish, your vision about yourself in the future, the outcomes, the more specific outcomes that you can enjoy and indulge in when you think about it. So visualization is important. And then the next thing is the obstacles, the challenges that you're going to face when you want to achieve these outcomes. And finally, the plan. And the plan has to be very specific in terms of when you engage in action, how long, with whom, in what situation, and only then can, I think, students' intentions be realized.
It's worth probably mentioning briefly, and maybe one of the OUP team can put up the link at some point, but the position paper that is free to download talks about this in more detail, including about the WHOOP method. But there's also a toolkit that goes alongside the position paper. And the toolkit has a lot of example activities. I'm not sure if there's one around the use of WHOOP, but all the other things that we've mentioned, there's a lot of additional material out there as well.
I went through the toolkit last night. It's so good. It really is. Those are just a few of the questions we've had at the moment, but I know you have a couple of other slides and things to go through. So I'll come back with any other questions that might be relevant throughout the session and leave it to you to go on to the next slide. I think someone should be able to put that for you now. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. Ling, what do you think? Shall we briefly talk about this?
Yeah, maybe this can be brief. In terms of, maybe this is a question that many of you have. What if, what about the schools? What if the schools don't support it or prioritize it? Then that may make your job a little bit more difficult, because it will be more effective if the schools take the role in in the design, development, implementation, and monitoring process. And this way, your work will be recognized. There will be resources for teachers, and there will be professional development opportunities for teacher. And these are really important for the the broad integration of self-regulated learning in the school environment. But of course, the society and the regulations from the country, the policies and the goals of the country or the Ministry of Education also play a role and affect your teaching experiences. So Hayo, if you want to add also the
yeah, I mean, it's a complex figure, and it's difficult to describe it, on just using a voice. There's a lot of text around it in the position paper, but I think you did a good job of capturing the main points. I guess the underlying recognition here in the framework is what you said, Ling, is that there's a lot of us teachers who might be working in schools where self-regulation is either not recognized or it doesn't necessarily have a clear place in the curriculum. I think a really common issue, and something that I've encountered myself, is where I'm interested in it, maybe my learners are even interested in it, but the exams, the tests that we're all working towards don't necessarily measure it. So then it makes it harder to justify spending time on it. So what this part of the framework tries to recognize is that, well, in order to understand what obstacles and opportunities actually might exist, is worth looking at from three different perspectives, sort of from very broad to more narrow. And as Ling said, at the societal level, which word that we used in the framework, you've got things like a Ministry of Education might have certain policies, of what is expected of the education system, what language learning outcomes should be worked towards, and there might be specific regulations and goals. And it's important to know those. And the reason I say that is because sometimes, actually, in the work that we did on writing the position paper, quite often, those policies and regulations do actually ask for the development of what we here talk about as self-regulated learning skills, but not necessarily with that terminology. right? To give you a quick example, I do a lot of work in Japan, and in Japan there's something called active learning, which the Ministry of Education very much wants teachers and learners to develop. So if you look at that, you think, well, active learning is not the same as self-regulated learning. But then you read a little bit more, and you see that what the government really wants is for learners to think for themselves and make decisions about their own learning. And you think, oh my gosh, actually, it is self-regulated learning. So it's helpful to kind of read between the lines and to understand what the broader context is that you're working within. Ling, do you perhaps briefly want to talk about the second one, the institutional, and then I'll pick up on the managerial?
So the institution can play a leading role in pulling together resources, but also in the sense that if they identify that self-regulated learning is important and they have the vision of developing self-regulation in the learners, then there has to be a clear communication of the vision so that everyone understands what it is and everyone is on board. And from the vision has to come with the curriculum in the sense of what is being taught and what is learned in the classroom, and the evaluation process as well of the students' improvements as well as the faculty and the staff in the school system. Then only then all the resources and all the initiatives and efforts can be pulled together and orchestrated to have better effects on learning and development among the students.
Yeah, and I think before we move on to the managerial one, I think it's important to emphasize that teachers, individual teachers, actually do have more influence on these things, especially when we get down to the institutional or departmental level than we sometimes think. So if a school has a vision statement or a mission statement, then you can be the one to ask, perhaps in a staff meeting or when talking to colleagues, well, what does that mean for us? If the school motto is, something like preparing for lifelong learners or something like that, you can say, well, actually, in order for our learners to become lifelong learners, they need to know how to self-regulate. So let's talk about where we put that into the curriculum, right? Or if you look at, for example, the different courses and the different syllabi that are being used and how they all fit together into the curriculum, you can say, well, where are we actually making some time to talk to learners about self-regulation? And you can ask questions about how learning is being evaluated. If you and your colleagues feel that self-regulation is important, then you can propose that maybe that be assessed and evaluated in some way, that learners' efforts are recognized in some way. And if you say, well, that's not going to be easy, I would agree with you. It hardly ever is easy, but I have seen many examples of teachers and teams of teachers making these kinds of incremental changes over time, because those have to come from us as we are the ones who understand the learners at the most intimate level. We know what our learners need for the future. So don't look at something like this and think, oh, well, I'm not the manager, or I'm certainly not the institution. So, there's nothing I can do. No, we have to, start the change, so to speak. Ling, would you be able to say a little bit more about the third circle, the managerial? Yeah.
The managerial.
Yeah.
I guess I started with the need for teachers' resources and recognition and development. So at the department level, I think this is where a lot of things can happen. And when we talk about design, development, and implementation and monitoring, that's what I think of. So resources, it can be like you asked about materials that you can use, techniques that you can use, and your efforts in the classroom with self-regulation are recognized or not within the department. Some kind of assessment of your teaching perhaps needs to take into consideration self-regulation, and of course professional development. And today a lot of you are here to learn more about self-regulation, but perhaps you still have a lot of questions, and workshops or training or pulling people together to share best practices and recommendations will be ways to move this forward. We have been thinking about self-regulation as so important, or at least we think about students' ability to kind of be more active in their learning, to design their learning as important. But sometimes this is not really talked about, or this is not really implemented so much in different schools and different programs. And this is when departments can play a big role in kind of pulling people together and move this forward.
Thank you. That sounds great. We've got 3 minutes, so I just wanted to end and ask you what your final recommendations were for our listeners today.
Should we take some questions, maybe?
We could probably have time. We've probably got time for 1 or 2 small questions. We had a really good question from, let me
There was one
find it.
question earlier from Bahari, which I'd like to respond to, because I suspect that it will reflect a lot of people's concerns. And could we just take the framework off the screen?
Yeah.
Thank you. So the concern there was that a lot of what we're talking about, the responsibility for it often falls on the individual learner, and that there's not enough support perhaps from the schools, from the organization, etc. And I think is such an important thing to recognize, that for better or for worse, often it is down to us to start the change that we want to see. And whether that's by talking to your managers, or whether that's by looking at the resources that are available in the library, or whether it's by, looking at the curriculum and making suggestions there, don't give up. Just because it's not provided for at the moment doesn't mean that you can't make it have the space in the curriculum that it needs and deserves, because your learners, rely on you to make that change.
That's such good advice. Thank you. I think we are running out of time, so we might struggle with the rest of the questions, but hopefully we'll get to them at some point. You might be able to comment back with replies. You can also, I just wanted to remind you that if you go to the QR code in the corner of your screen, you will find the position paper, the self-regulated learning position paper there to download, along with the toolkit. And I highly recommend you have a look at that, because it is so great. But thank you. Oh, yay! Is that, which way is it? Is it this way? This way? Yeah, we'll just do that. We play it safe. But thank you so much, Haya and Lynn, for such a wonderful first session of ELTOC Chapter 6. It really was great. You've had so many thank yous and fantastics and great ideas in the comments. So thank you so much. I will now take you off the screen to enjoy the rest of your days. But thank you for coming today and giving us that lovely, wonderful talk. We will see you very soon, I'm sure.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank you. So just before we move on to our next session, I just wanted to give you a few quick reminders again about certificates. So they are available for the whole of ELTOC Chapter 6 and must be claimed within 48 hours. So to claim your certificate, click the link in the comments, which should appear now, and then tap claim your certificate when you get there, and you should be able to submit your details. You can also use the QR code, which is either one of the sides, I'm not really sure where it is, but click on that QR code and you should be able to do exactly the same thing there. And another just quick reminder before I let Sean introduce our next set of speakers. We don't want you to miss out on the rest of ELTOC. We're here today for this block, but there is another block that returns at 1:45 US UTC time. So head over to the website, click on that QR code, and you'll see the full schedule and be able to set your reminders. As it's live on social, the spaces today are not limited. So share with your colleagues and the rest of your networks, because we want to see as many of you as possible. But yeah, I'm going to hand over to Sean now, who is going to introduce our next set of speakers. Thank you, Sean. Which way is it?
I don't know. I was just thinking of coming in. Where is it? I guess it depends if we're mirroring our cameras. I looked at it. It's there, isn't it, for me? But it's above my head. It's the kind of the.
I'm trying to work out there, I think.
It's the ELTOC game. Where is the QR code in relation to us? Before we just thank you, Katie. Thank you for that. And well done on doing your homework. I'm very impressed you read the toolkit before.
The toolkit's great. I love the toolkits for our position papers. They are are fab. So I definitely highly recommend you download the position paper and the toolkit, which
So
is
but
is up there.
So it's up there, no, there or down there somewhere. So that QR code is the link to everything. So just click on that. Let Katie take a breather and hand over to me. I can see that in terms of housekeeping, chat box moderators, could you unstar the current questions so that we can get ready for the next session? I know it's a bit odd, but thank you very much. I can see you're doing that. Super. Hi everyone. Are you everybody okay? Enjoy that self-regulated learning session. I did. As much as I always enjoy listening to Hayo and Leah, I am really excited about the next session because it's on a topic that is of great interest to me. I'm laughing because what you can't see is I can see when we're in the room, I can see the other cameras off screen, and I can see Ben pulling a funny face in the camera before I introduce him on the screen. Ben, behave yourself. So welcome if you are just joining us. Welcome. This is ELTOC, Chapter 6, Block 1. You've missed the first talk, but it'll be as a recording not long from now. As Katie just said, and we will keep reminding you about this, the certificate is only available for 48 hours. So see those links going through your social media channel now. Have a look at those. Click on the link that's going through the chat box, and then you can register for that. Ante, with the QR code, if you're on your mobile phone, open your camera. If you open your camera and put it over so I'll do it for you. So you take your camera. If your phone is new enough, open it up. Like that, just hold it over the QR code like that, and it should flash the link on the screen, and then it flashes it through just like that, and then you get through it that way. So have a look for that, and if you can't, if there is an issue, just pop it back in the chat box, and we'll try and help you there. But you will be able to get everything through the links as well. The QR code is OUP putting everything in one place to make it easy for us. So, shall we go to the hottest topic in probably in the world, and never mind education at the moment, a little bit about AI, and I'm delighted to reintroduce to ELTOC, because Ben, if you have joined ELTOCs before, then you will have met Ben before for sure. So, and this is my first time working with Guy, so welcome to Guy. I'm going to put them into the screen there. You can see Ben and Guy are joining us. If you don't know who they are and you haven't read the program, then Ben Knight is the head of pedagogy research. I can't speak today when I have to do the intros. Ben Knight is the head of pedagogy research at Oxford University Press, and is responsible for making sure there is a clear research-informed pedagogical approach underpinning OUP, ELT courses and learning materials. He's particularly focused on data-driven digital learning materials to help teachers and learners be more successful in their language learning. He works with innovative thinkers in language pedagogy and research, and uses that to support development and educational reform projects around the world. Whereas Guy is a teacher with over 20 years of experience, during which time he's not only taught students, but conducted speaking and writing exams for learners of different levels. As a teacher trainer, Guy has explored the most effective ways to incorporate tech into language learning from students from B1 level to C2 level. He aims to create engaging, interactive and impactful learning experiences for everyone. And they are here today to talk to us about ChatGPT and AI and everything we need to know about it in the next 30 plus minutes. Ben, Guy, over to you. Enjoy the talk.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you so much. Thanks for that great introduction. I think we're just going to get started. I think we're going to get some slides coming up. Great. There we are. And as people say, it's a topic that intrigues me. It's one of those topics with a huge amount of hype. We're hearing constantly, this is going to revolutionize education. And that's exciting, but it's also a little bit, makes us a little bit nervous. If you're in the classroom and you're thinking, have I been revolutionized or not? It's uncertain. And so that's one of the things we really wanted to look at today. What is really the impact of this for us as teachers now and in the near future? What does it really mean for us? How is it going to affect us? And what can we do to get ready as teachers? That's really the spirit of this. I'm not an expert in this area. Guy is much more experienced, and so I'm going to rely a lot on Guy to bring his experience of using ChatGPT and other AI tools into the classroom to talk about what is possible, what the advantages, what are the things that we need to worry about. I think is that okay, guys? Should we get started?
Yeah, let's go for it. I think that sounds great.
And as always, we're really happy for you to send in the questions, for us to respond to your questions and make this as interactive as possible. But just to get started, we've got our own kind of seed questions to get the discussion going. By the way, I can see fantastic hellos from everybody, from Georgia, from Ukraine, from all over the world. I can see fantastic. Okay, can we move on to that next slide?
Right.
So they were starting off with, well, why do teachers need to know about AI in the classroom? If I'm a teacher, can I just ignore it? Is it something that's going to go away, or does it really matter to me? Guy, what do you think?
I think we need to approach this from two ways. I mean, we're going to come to the second way in the next slide. But first of all, we need to be aware of how AI can help teachers in the classroom, not only with preparing lessons, with extra materials, and also for ways of grading, of assisting. But for me, in my experience, the most important one is it actually motivates students a lot. It's something they really enjoy engaging with. It's something which a lot of us are aware is going to be needed we thought it was going to be in the future, but now it's very much in the short-term future. And also, we already have it. Maybe we're not aware of what applications already use AI. So I think it's something that we all rapidly need to get on board with.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point about, in education, we're usually thinking about how we're preparing our students for their working life, their life outside the classroom. That's what motivates us. That's what drives us. And this is going to be part of their lives. It already is. And so if we're not integrating that into our educational programs, we're not helping them.
And as well as, we also need to be aware that what we use AI for actually shapes AI. It learns from us. It learns from our students as well, and what we put in. So that's something which we also need to be aware of and be conscious of.
Yeah. So and part of that, I think, is also that, AI obviously is being developed by people from an engineering, IT kind of background. And if we, from a teaching educational point of view, want to be influencing those developments, we need to be engaging, we need to be using AI as well.
Well, it's not only from a tech background. A lot of people are getting involved in AI from the humanities at the moment, because we're still humans. We still need the human touch to interact with each other. It's not just technicians, although they're very important, but even just from learning a language, we still need to know what to ask the AI for it to do and how to ask it.
Yeah. Guy, you said there were two things. Did you say the second one?
Well, the next one is really how we use AI to teach English. And I wanted to distinguish between the two, because on one hand, you've got the kind of backroom use of AI, which students maybe don't really need to know about, but it can help teachers certainly ease their workload a lot. But actually going into how we teach English is probably the more practical application of it all. So I believe that is in the next slide.
Yeah, great. Can someone take us on to the next slide? By the way, I wanted to mention one thing. In some of the comments, I'm seeing people talking about the use of AI by their students to cheat at tests, to do their homework. And that's a question we're going to come to.
I was just seeing something else as well in the comments, which were live as well. The downsides, we're obviously going to talk about that. And the classic example is cheating, but we're going to explain a bit more about that in a minute. So how is AI changing the way we teach English? I think the most important one is it can now be used to personalize for students' needs. It can be set up by the teacher, either online or through classes, and then the student themselves can decide how they use AI. Maybe one student has problems with tenses, the other one needs to really refocus on phrasal verbs. So everything can now be tailored individually to it. there's also the aspect of using L1 in the classroom and then translating it direct into English. And I've used this with quite a few languages. And as always, it's not 100% perfect, but it's certainly a step up. It's certainly a lot more useful. If you learn from translating from your mother tongue into English, it can be used for that as well.
How do you do that, Guy, when you do that?
Well, you can obviously use the Google Translate, but in ChatGPT, they do this. In fact, I was recently shown an application this morning, which is used through WhatsApp, which automatically translates depending on what you want. As always with all of this, with new tech, how you frame it, how you use it is what you get back. So if you're not 100% sure, it's better to refine your questions for it. But a good way to do this is to remember that sometimes with European languages, as where I'm based, we have a lot of similar words in English. We also have a lot of false friends. So for the students to actually focus and look at the word, maybe at the word stem, and then to think about how it can translate and how it's got a lot of similarities with their own language. That's kind of a basic skill to use, but it could be very beneficial as well.
And that's a bit like that relates to the previous talk about self-regulated learning, that kind of awareness of language differences and what you need to learn.
And yes, I saw in the comments earlier as well, someone was asking about the skills for speaking and reading, but coincidentally, there's a good talk on that tomorrow through ELTOC. So that's worth watching as well. I don't want to steal anyone's thunder, and that would be very useful to have a look at as well. And quickly, before we move on, I also want to bring attention to the fact that through AI and maybe the use of the internet as well, it can tailor people's learning needs. They can match people up a lot easier. But maybe the biggest factor is fun. People like using tech, and we have to remember our demographic. They're far more used to working with tech, with working through culture, with games, with films, than maybe some teachers are. So it is fun. It can be very useful.
Yeah, I know. I saw someone who was kind of explaining a lesson where they were working with their students on designing the prompts that would help them get the essay that they wanted to write. And so that was the lesson. The teacher was focusing on how to write better prompts to ChatGPT. And of course, they were completely transfixed because this was really useful information. The whole lesson was in English, but it was really engaging because it was important new information to them.
Can I quickly comment on something people have said in the chat? Yeah. So I've got a comment from Shah Verdot Fatima. How do you make students reflect and participate in learning when they do not associate any value with acquiring knowledge using ChatGPT to do everything? I think we need to take a step back from just looking at the tool for it to do everything and maybe think more about the learning journey, the learning progress, maybe thinking more about multi-skills. We all know we use languages pretty much through using it, through doing it. So there's also a comment saying that it can automatically translate. What's the point of learning language? Well, we need to have more nuances. We need to, when we use language, we need to know what to create it for. So if we just rely on translation, there are going to be some points which are going to be missed, or maybe some subtleties which will certainly enhance what the person's trying to communicate.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's also true when we talk about a written piece of work. You know, it's true that I can use ChatGPT to create a written text, but how do I know it's good or not unless I've kind of learned those skills of writing a good text? So I think, you know, it's going to affect what we need to learn, what we need to teach our students. But
exactly.
Not
and
going
I'm
to be
sure
able to
you've come across. Sorry, I'm sure you've come across some writing examples where sometimes the mistakes are far more humorous. It gives an opportunity to springboard into other topics. It makes us more human. You're right. We could all just bash out commands or very, for want of a better term, robotic language. But by learning more of the subtleties and the nuances, it will certainly help the students and make everything a bit more accessible.
Yeah, absolutely. Have we covered the points that we wanted on that particular question about how it
I think
affects
so.
teaching?
I think
Yeah.
so, yeah.
Let's move on to the others. I mean, I can see lots of great questions coming through, and we're going to come to those as we go through. So please keep adding your questions. So this is, apart from all the positive things, well, what are the concerns? What are the problems with using AI in language teaching?
Okay, well, I think this is really important that we all focus on to have a balance with this. And some concerns and problems are probably more heavily weighted than others. I mean, let's start off with the main one, which would be the digital divide. Not everybody has access to tech. Not all teachers are lucky enough to use this in the classroom. Not all students are available to have it either. So that could be one of the main ones. The other one, obviously, is privacy. Where does the information we input into the large language models go? How is it used? Probably from a social perspective, the biggest and by far the most important thing we need to address now is the issue of discrimination and bias, because the large language models may inadvertently use bias because of the data which has been inputted. So as teachers and certainly as users of this, we need to focus on what are we really trying to say with this? Can we use this in a way which is accessible and equal for everyone?
Yeah.
I don't know if you've come across any other ones as well.
Well, I'm looking at a question from Robert Baumgartner, which is a good question, which is, or I think there might have been another similar question as well, which is, if you're talking to our students, what should we be warning them about, making them aware of? What risks are there that we should make them aware of?
Well, I think the first thing, in my classes, I always install AI rules. So it is in a semi-controlled environment. But I think they need to be aware, but this goes on with most teaching online. They shouldn't trust everything 100%. They should always cite references, use reliable sources of information and news sources. In the age of deep fakes and fake news at the moment, it's vital that students and maybe learn how to spot it, or maybe to question a lot of this as well. The use of AI in class certainly encourages critical thinking. And I always say to them before we even start it, what are we using this for? How are we going to use the information? What's it going to be used for? Before we even open up a laptop or a screen. I think the other thing as well is for them not just to copy and paste. Some of us will remember with the first time that Wikipedia came out and students just copied and pasted everything of that. And yeah, it might be right 100%, but we learn from making mistakes. So the students really need to use it as a tool rather than just to rely on it 100%. And that onus is also on the teacher.
How much do you worry about students and kind of personal data, personal information that they might be putting into the AI tool?
Well, I work for an organization. Can I mention that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I work for the British Council, and some of the things we tend to do where I am in my part of the world in Spain is we don't let them use their own personal devices. We try to use everything through a laptop. I think there's moves for us to have our own class accounts. So everything that we use it for can be controllable and, more importantly, accounted for. A lot of students will probably ignore it if they. A lot of the social media apps already have privacy issues. In fact, in Europe, a couple of months ago, ChatGPT was banned in Italy. It's now been reascended. It's okay. And more, as well as there's a lot of rules and laws being introduced, or certainly in the process of being introduced into society and into schools as well. Right. So that's something, before we sit down, before we do AA, have a pre-session about it.
Yeah, to be really upfront and explicit about the kind of best behaviors.
good practice. I mean, some people don't even sign out of their accounts if they're using laptops. So, but again, teenagers do this. Teachers will have to constantly remind them. It's okay. I mean, it's good for everybody if we are all aware of this.
It's almost like teenagers do crazy things. You know, who knew?
So, who'd have thought?
Yeah. Okay. I think we should move on to our next question.
Oh, this is a big one.
How can we adapt AI in the class to reduce copying and cheating? So this, when we talk about the concerns around AI, this is usually the most commonly cited one. And teachers, you know, quite rightly, I think, worry about this because I think because a lot of our assessment previously has been based on written assignments, which we have taken as, you know, a good and easy way to assess their learning.
Well, and we should never forget the fact that the sheer physical act of writing helps us to memorize language and helps us to formulate questions. This is a really difficult topic to talk about, mostly because we need to focus on what type of assessment are we using. If it's just to send somebody a digital copy of an essay or a writing, then even AI itself can give you a copy which cannot be detected by AI. So even though there are detectors, they are not foul-proof. They can be bypassed. I'm strongly of the belief that if we use AI in the classroom and it's used as a tool, maybe to help students how to write, to compare the answers, and then get them to do a multi-skilled project, maybe to defend their ideas by speaking, maybe by physically writing in some tests, depending on what you want to test. This is starting to happen, but going back to the idea of defending your ideas, like defending a thesis, this is rapidly becoming popular in certain universities in America, in the UK, and in Europe. So this has been mentioned by other people as well. Maybe we need to step away from the whole idea of memorization and how we use our English skills in a more practical level and get the students to demonstrate this in the classroom. But this does include physically writing as well. But not everybody is able to write either by pen. We need to remember the SEND community, and they find this a lot easier if you've got dyslexia or if you've got dysgraphia. It's a lot easier to use apps or these kind of things. So I would say use it, use the tool rather than just ban it. I mean, let's see what they say in any comments here. It's certainly kicked off.
I mean, I like your suggestion around this kind of defending verbally what you've written, because it's also great for, you know, mediation. One of those areas that we sometimes struggle to bring to life in the classroom. You know, that ability to take the ideas that that's been created in a written form and then kind of talk about them in spoken English. I think it has that added advantage, as well as the one that you're saying that it means that you can't just get away with cutting and pasting something from AI.
It also incorporates other skills, including collaborative work, including social interaction with other students, either online or face-to-face. So it is kind of a win-win approach. But as I say, I don't think we can go back now to the traditional method of just having writing as an assessment and you believing that's 100% by the student. But do we need to? That is a bigger question.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's interesting. I've seen some comments about detector programs, which are a form of AI, of course, as someone points out. And there are some, and I don't think we can dismiss them being useless, but they're also not, as Romana says, I'm sure they do catch some things, but they can't be 100% reliable. There's almost like a arms escalation between.
Well, I know because I've done it. I confess. I'm sorry. But yes, the comment from Romana, aren't the detection programs run by AI? Yes, But if you know what you're doing, you can get the AI to produce a writing, and it will tell you that it's non-AI detectable, and it will even put it through its own checking program, and it's no, this is not detectable. In fact, they put the US Constitution through the AI, and it was said it was written by AI.
Yeah.
But why is this? Because a lot of the information it gets from students or from people interacting with comes from humans. It's not just making it up. It comes from the internet. So it is very difficult to detect. So this is one of the reasons why I thought it would be a better idea to move slightly away from that. Here's a piece of writing. Great. No, let's incorporate other skills. Let's incorporate the needs of the learners. Let's use it in a more practical way.
Yeah, and I think people are looking at the comments, people are picking up on this and kind of making the point that that's implied in what you're saying, that using AI to develop skills and knowledge is really good. That when we're talking about graded assessments, that's a slightly different situation, and you don't have to avoid AI just because there are some times where you need graded assessments.
Well, it's funny as well, because I have used AI to grade written assessments. And again, if you know of the typical level of the student, say, for example, they're a B2 from the Common European Framework level, and suddenly they produce this amazing proficient level essay, questions are raised. I mean, this all goes back. We need it as a tool. We still need the human touch. We need to interact and use it all together. So it's certainly, it's a very much a thorny question.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I'm not sure if we're going to get to this later, but the amazingness of being able to put in your assessment criteria, your rubrics, into a program such as ChatGPT and ask it to use those to assess a piece of writing is actually amazing, and it's a fantastic thing, I think, for teachers who may lack confidence in their own ability to evaluate their students' writing or even speaking, to have the support of a tool such as an AI tool such as ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm. I've just seen a really interesting comment here from Lisa. What if the learners are not ready to go beyond what is taught in class? Well, luckily, that's where teachers come in, to encourage and to motivate learners to take the step beyond. Maybe, again, by personalizing the material, finding out what the student is particularly interested in or even needs, and using the human touch to encourage them to do more and more. And in that way, not only will they do that in class, they might be more inclined to do that outside class in their own areas of interest or hobbies.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, it's just a constant stream of interesting questions and comments. There's something from her name's gone off now, Claire, I think it was, talking about what do we do if we suspect something has been produced through an AI program, but we can't prove it, which is a good question, and it is something worth being careful about, because certainly some countries are more litigious than others, and I know
yes, that's definitely an issue with intellectual
certainly in the US they're being very careful about accusing people.
Well, with other institutions as well, they have to be. Going back to what you've just said, I mean, that's happened to me, as I said earlier, and I've given the student a 10 out of 10 for reading, for motivation, and I said, okay, you've done this the first time. It's clearly used by AI. And then you tailor it into things. Okay, so let's sit down. Let's think about it. You can do this live. They can use the laptop, but you can help them that way. But something which again, maybe not everybody is aware of, is it does increase the levels of reading and interaction tenfold. I have seen this with my classes, and it's always a very tricky topic. How do we get students to read more? Funnily enough, with AI, they have to read more. They have to be more involved in this and use this ability. And again, I don't think they should necessarily be punished. Okay, if it's an important exam, that's a separate issue. But in the classroom, they shouldn't be punished. They should be encouraged for developing their skills. And then again, it's up to the teacher how you can maybe control that a little bit more.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Shall we look at our next question?
Okay.
Yeah, so what can English language teachers do to ensure transition into AI readiness? So really behind that is the point I made at the beginning is that we know we're moving into an AI, a world full of AI increasingly. So what can we do to kind of be ready for that? How can we prepare? What would you advise, Guy?
Well, apart from attending talks like this and reading articles, there's many different ideas, many web pages, apps available. I think there's two main points which teachers can do. The first one is experiment. Use it yourself. Find out what you can do. As I say, I did this morning with an app someone sent me. I managed to break it, so to speak, and then repair it and ask it, interact with the technology. Put yourself in the learner's shoes, in your student's shoes. What do they want to learn? How are they going to learn? I think sometimes as teachers, we're far more into, this is what you're going to do. No, think about it from their perspective. Experiment with the tech and see what happens. If it doesn't go wrong, well, that's okay as well. You can learn. The second point is to speak to each other. It's really important. I've learned a lot from speaking to my colleagues. Maybe they don't give you the perfect answers, but they will certainly inspire you into experimenting a bit more. I'm a great believer in this. I'm a great believer in when there's new tech, we shouldn't be scared of making mistakes. We need to involve the students with this. It's not necessarily our tech. The youth are going to be using this a lot more. So our role as teachers, as educators, is for us to be involved a bit more with this. So that would be my advice for everybody. Yeah. Experiment, collaborate, talk with each other, attend events like this and the one tomorrow as well about speaking and reading.
Yeah, no, that's really great advice. I mean, it's absolutely it's a free piece of software, so there is no reason why anyone should not have signed up, accessed or downloaded, depending on where you are, ChatGPT, and be using it and try your own assignments, try and see what you can do. And I think the other thing is what we're learning about systems such as ChatGPT, it's around the prompts. There is a whole art and skill and knowledge around how you use prompts to get where you want to get to. And that's such an important set of skills for people today. And there are quite a lot of YouTube videos, I think, around suggesting to teachers what their prompts are, what they've used, what worked, what didn't work. So I think that would be a good use of time.
Yeah, and as I say, it goes back to the whole fun idea. Have fun with it. Well, I wanted to say something else. I'm kind of getting distracted by the comments as well here. Is kind of difficult to keep up. But yeah, I can't remember now what I was going to talk about. Is AI a probable threat to teachers? Will it take over? I don't think so. I'd like to think not. Certainly not in this moment. Maybe in a couple of generations it's possible. But for the moment, look at us all now. We're speaking globally. We're all helping each other. You're giving us comments. Can AI necessarily do this? No, it needs human input. It needs human interaction. And so do people learning. Some people will like it, some people won't. We just need to use it as a tool. That's what I was going to say as well. Move away from just using large language models such as ChatGPT. It's certainly a good basis to use, but there's more than 3,000 different apps depending on what you specifically want. I saw a really good one. I'm not going to give it free advertising, but it's basically an app where you can interview and speak to figures of history. And wow. For students, so you can speak to, for example, Genghis Khan or whoever, and you can have a conversation. You can interview them.
Guy, we're not the BBC, so you're allowed to give free advertising. And also, I think it's
I think it's History to Me. History to Me is called. It's
Okay.
an. I wasn't quite sure, Ben. I don't want to be getting into trouble on in my first presentation.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's just because I know as a person who listens to presentations, it's really good when someone gives you actual apps and websites to check out. So,
but this is the point. There's a lot out there. I mean, that's just one example of how you can motivate students. There's many more. We haven't really talked about generative AI either, where people put in the ideas and it can produce films, it can produce images. People said earlier it can produce PowerPoints. I've used this as well. It can also produce music. You can say what you want. You can type in the theme and it will produce music for you. It can do music to video, all of these things. And again, I'm sure many of our students will appreciate that. So going back to the main idea, experiment, go and find out. And then after that, collaborate with people.
Yeah, certainly this question of making teachers kind of unnecessary. I can't see that. At least in, as you say, in the next generation, it's the social side, the impact of a teacher on your motivation. It's difficult to replicate through a system, but the way that AI can improve your learning experience and also the teacher's experience, that support role is really important.
There's a question from Mohammed. It says, what about teacher-student relationship and ethical implications? So in relation to this, well, if we're just talking about a professional educational relationship, it would probably enhance it, I'd imagine. If you've suddenly got a teacher who's interested in how a language can be taught for you to improve, I would certainly think it would, in my case, I'd be far more likely to have a more cordial relationship with a teacher rather than a conflictive one. And ethical implications, well, again, as adults, now we have a moral and ethical responsibility to maybe control the use of AI when you're with your students. It's something you have to be very much aware of local laws. You have to be very much aware of content, what's going to happen. That's on the teacher. That's our responsibility as adults as well, and to help the next generation come through.
Yeah, I mean, there's a question from John May here about kind of creating teaching materials, that generative AI aspect that you're talking about. But so the question focuses more on traditional publishers, but that, if you don't mind, I don't really want to focus on that so much as the fact that it allows teachers to create content which is more useful to their particular students, which I think is one of the really exciting things here. And it's one of the things that's floating in the background, which is personalization and customization. We often talk about that, but I'm wondering if you're a teacher now and you're looking, you're thinking, how is this going to help me with personalization of learning? Can you give any examples of how you've been able to personalize learning?
I can give a perfect example for this. It's not to everyone's tastes, but I've had a class mostly consisting of teenage girls, and we entered into the ChatGPT, and I got them to role play and interview Harry Styles, who I don't really know much about him, but he's an amazing pop star and very much of the moment. And they knew that everybody knew they weren't really interviewing Harry Styles, but the way it was produced, they managed to suspend their disbelief, and they asked him questions. But the whole process of this, what questions do you want to ask Harry? The personalization comes from motivation, funnily enough. And then you'll be surprised what the students want to learn if they have got sufficient interest in the topic. And again, you're controlling it. It's in your classroom. It's something which is vital for them to have this kind of mediator, this moderator.
Yeah.
I
mean, the kind of examples I've seen, not quite as fun as that, but when you have university students, if you're teaching university students, and they come from a particular area, discipline, so engineering, but not just engineering, they're chemical engineers. And so they want texts and things which relate to that particular subject. And at the moment, it's quite difficult for publishers to produce level appropriate texts and exercise and tasks around a specific area like that. Whereas now it is possible for teachers to find those texts and to make them level appropriate through AI, through ChatGPT.
Very much so. And again, maybe it's not to generate content, but it certainly eases the workload of the typical tutor or professor at university. They can put in PDFs of whatever subject they want, use an application, and it will highlight and take out and then summarize what they need the information for. I mean, I've also seen it used with the plugins of ChatGPT now. I think it's Wolfram Alpha. It helps a lot with mathematical equations. In fact, I believe some equations are the ones which have taken years to solve are rapidly being used to do this. So, right. And again, it hasn't just happened like that. It has involved people playing with it, experimenting with it, trial and error, thinking outside the box how they can use it.
Guy, I'm not sure how many more minutes we've got, but I've seen a few questions which we haven't picked up on, which are around younger learners, elementary, kind of primary level. Mm-hmm. Is this? I know that's not really where you mainly teach, but is this something you've some knowledge of?
Well, more my colleagues. No, I deliberately not gone below the age of 14 to use it, mostly because I don't think it's necessarily appropriate, and also I'd rather involve the parents with this. It's not really up to me to say it. My colleagues have used this, and they've used it very much more, again, from the fun aspect, and maybe not so intellectual as getting it to generate content, but certainly for the students themselves to make their own stories, for them to use basic questions, how they do it, for them to produce images. I get something which has been very, very popular for the students to make their own presentations. I want a story on blah, 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 a castle with a unicorn. Okay, let's type in castle, let's type in unicorn, and it comes up and they have this amazing presentation. I never had that. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like Hanan's question, struggling students, motivating them using AI. I mean, it's a lot of that is the motivation around the topics. What is in your mind, what you're interested in. You can create text, you can engage straight away.
Okay. Going back to what we said earlier about the digital divide, there's a question from Syra. Which sort of equipment is required if one is interested in using it in a class? You just need a basic laptop with an internet connection, or even a phone with a decent connection. It doesn't have to be lots of bells and whistles. It can just be a basic program. In fact, you can download your own models and just have it for what you want to use it for. If you just wanted to have it as a vocab bank or whatever, again, it makes things easier rather than you spending a lot more time. It can be done a lot quicker. So it does depend on your use as well. Isn't using AI cheating? Not if it's helping the student to learn. Sorry, Sean.
No, I agree. I wasn't going to contradict you on that. While you were talking, I used ChatGPT to try and find your app. Is it Hello History? Is that the?
That's
app?
The one. Thank you.
Yeah. So Hello History is the app to which Guy referred, which allows you to chat to historical figures. And there is actually a blog post that I've come across on a website about it, which looks very interesting for it. It's funny you mentioned Wolfram Alpha there, because the best book I've read about ChatGPT is by Stephen Wolfram at the moment. That came out, and it gives a really good explanation of how ChatGPT works with it. And my favorite AI at the moment is neither of those. It's Document AI in Google Docs, because it does your writing for you so well. So if you use Google Docs, you can add Document AI to it. Which I think is even more worrying. It wrote a nice blurb for me for a talk that I've got to give. So there you go. Ben and Guy giving us a really good insight into ChatGPT, to AI and all the tools that come up. As Guy has flagged up a couple of times, he's good at doing the advertising for us. There is a talk later on, early in the hours in the morning for me, about artificial intelligence and reading and speaking, which is about 2 a.m., I think. Guy, how did you manage to get it right first time? The point the figures in.
I cheated because I saw people doing it earlier, and I thought you were going to ask me. So.
I think we're going to make everybody, if you've only just joined us, you won't know what we're doing. It's kind of working out where the QR code is in our frame with it. We need an AI to tell us, no, the other way, Ben, that's it. It does depend if your camera's mirroring or not as well with it. But Ben, Guy, thank you so much. You did a grand job as well of trying to get through the many questions that are there with it. I'm sure we'll be hearing from you both again at some point about AI and how it's going to affect language learners. But there are a lot of information they gave us there. If you have missed any of that talk, of course, there will be the recording. Ben, Guy, please go enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you so much for joining us in Block 1 of ELTOC Chapter 6. I look forward to seeing you again another time. I'm going to drop you off now so you can go and enjoy the rest of your day. And so that's 2 talks down. These blocks go so fast once we start going, don't they? There is only 1 talk left in the block, and that's going to be coming up in about 10 minutes because we're going to go into a little break so everybody can stretch their legs, refresh their drinks before the last talk. I can still see there are lots of questions coming in about ChatGPT. As I said, I doubt that's the last that you've heard of it in terms of talks that and information that the publishers give you. So do put those questions in so they can get noted and hopefully be addressed in the future. If you have, I'm glad you enjoyed the session, Marlon. I'm glad everybody's having a good time. So we're going to go into a break very shortly, and we'll be back at 20 minutes to the hour. So 40. So for me, it would be 13:40. And that's when our last session is going to begin. Just to remind you that if you, while we're in a break, we'll be playing a video reminding you of some of the Oxford University things that we've mentioned already, but it's probably a good time for you to get a certificate filled in. Remember, you've only got 48 hours to get your certificate with it, and you can see on screen now there is click the link in the comments to get your ELTOC certificate, and very, very shortly, if it's not there, it'll come up again. You will get a link into the chat box which will take you through to a place where you can register for a certificate. You have until Monday to do that. We keep joking about finding the QR code on our screen, that one up there. If you have got a mobile device, point your camera at it, click on the link there, and you'll get access to all the links that we keep showing throughout the day. We have just referenced it, but remember, this is block 1 of ELTOC. Block 2 starts in the early hours for me of Saturday morning, and there is a second block there. If you go to the ELTOC website, you can see what the program is. We know there's a talk about AI and reading because we've already spoken about that. But go and see what other talks are there. And remember, you don't have to sign up for the blog because it's on social media. So just make sure you set an alarm and remind yourself of what time it begins, and go join in that block where there are some amazing speakers there. And finally, before you go to refresh your drink, if you're enjoying ELTOC, now's a good time to also tell us that to show us that you're enjoying it. So please hit on your social media. If you like it, hit the like button. If you're loving it, hit the loving button. Just put them up there. It makes us feel happy because we can see them come on our screen, and it reminds us how much we all enjoy ELTOC. Okay, folks, about 10 minutes. I will be around with it. The link for certificates has just gone through the chat, so have a look up. Sharif, I can see you're on LinkedIn, so we'll make sure somebody pops it into LinkedIn in a moment. Sometimes it doesn't go directly from where we are into LinkedIn, so don't worry. It will appear. Have a look. Or alternatively, you could scan the QR code on the screen now and get it from there. Go ahead. Thanks. So the moderator just told me the link has gone into so the certificate link has gone into LinkedIn. Thanks for that, Jess. So do have a look there. And if you're on the other social media, Facebook, YouTube, you should see the links coming through there now. I can see them in the comment boxes for it. Okay, so 10 minutes. Go refresh your drink, stretch your legs, get ready for the final session when we'll be joined by 2 more fabulous speakers. I'll see you in about 10 minutes. All right, see you in a moment.
everyone, and welcome back from our short break. I hope you managed to get another drink and grab some more snacks and are ready to go for our final session of ELTOC Chapter 6, Block 1. Just before I hand over to Sean to introduce our next set of speakers, I wanted to do our usual reminder for certificates. So as you know already, certificates are available for the whole of ELTOC Chapter 6 and must be claimed within 48 hours. So it is a good idea to try and claim your certificate as soon as possible by clicking the link that should appear in the comments now. That's there. Or going to the QR code, which I hope if I do that, I'm pointing to the QR code. Yes, I am. Yeah, I've got it right this time. So click on that. Scan that QR code there and you should be able to go through and claim your certificate by submitting your details. The other thing I wanted to remind you is that this is not just the only block for ELTOC Chapter 6. We do have another one returning at 1:45 UTC time. So head over to the website, see the full schedule and set your reminders. Again, by clicking that QR code there. So head to that schedule there. You should be able to find out about all the sessions that we have in that block 2 of Chapter 6. And as you know, we're on social media this time, so the spaces for these sessions aren't limited. So do forward this to your colleagues and let them know and share amongst your network so we can have as many people attend as possible. So I'm going to hand over to Sean now, who's going to introduce our next set of speakers. I got it right, Sean.
I know. I'm sat here feeling I'm under pressure to get it right, and I knew I'd get it wrong if I did that. I think you've been sat off camera practicing, haven't you?
I nearly did, but no, I was just going to guess.
I'm making notes for the next ELTOC that I'm going to make sure that moves across. So when you go like that, I'm going to flick a button which moves it that way to get this.
Confused me. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you so much.
Let you introduce our speakers. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to introduce the speakers, and I'm going to go off screen and practice pointing until I get it right. So just to prove to Katie I do know where it is by the end of it. Hello, welcome back again. We are almost ready for our final session of Block 1. I can see Marty and Donald are waiting off screen. Just before I do that, I just had a message from the web people, so to speak, and it seems that so many of you are trying to hit on the certificate link at the moment that there is some disruption with it. Okay, I can understand why you're trying to get on the link now, because obviously you've only got 48 hours to get the certificate. But can I just if you are trying and it's not working, just hang on. It's because there is too much traffic going towards the certificate. There are thousands of people that attend this session. So if all of you are trying to click on the same link at the same time, then obviously the internet can't handle it. So welcome. Hi, everybody. Hi. Who are we to see? I can see Italy, the Dominican Republic, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, Czechia, Dublin, Czechia, Italy, so many countries here. And they're obviously here for our third talk of this block. So we've already looked at self-regulated learning. We've already looked at how AI is going to fit in with us. And we're going to end block 1 by looking at professional development with a fairly sensible question of why do professional development? And the people that are going to talk about this are two people who are fascinating speakers. The first of the two, we've got Marty Anderson, who is a teacher educator who has worked with teachers, teacher trainers and education systems for more than 30 years. She believes that professional development for teachers is crucial and must involve reflective activities. Here. She spent countless hours in the classroom around the world as observing and supporting teachers' development, and she views teachers as the most precious asset to learners of all ages, and is curious how systems of education affect teacher development and student learning. The other person speaking is Donald Freeman, Professor of Education at the School of Education at the University of Michigan. He works on designing and studying equitable access to professional learning opportunities for teachers in a variety of circumstances. He's led the Learning for Teaching project, a decade-long multi-country study of ELT public sector teachers' professional development experiences, and served as a consultant on ELTE ELTeach, an online professional development program for national teachers. He's written loads, and if you've not read one of his papers, why not? They are insightful, and they make up a big part of a number of courses that I tutor on. So I'm fascinated to hear them both. Let's welcome them to ELTOC 2, ELTOC Block 1, Chapter 6. There we go. Donald, you're on screen.
Hello.
Marty, you're on screen.
Good day.
We'll get your slides on the screen very shortly.
Wonderful.
I'll
Thanks,
hand
Sean.
over to you. Bye-bye for now.
Thanks, Sean.
Well, it's good to see you all. We've been doing a lot of prepping for this event, as virtual as it is, and it's wonderful for it to finally happen. Thanks, Sean, for the great introductions. What Sean didn't mention is that Marty and I have worked together for, what did you say, Marty? At least 20 years or more. We were faculty.
Yeah, a minimum of 20.
I think we were faculty colleagues at the School for International Training, and we've worked on projects in various parts of the world. Marty's written for OUP, I've written for OUP. So it's great to be here and to be with you all and to talk about this topic. You know, when we were starting to set this whole thing up, and Marty and I were talking about this, we looked at the title and we said, you know, there's a way that people might understand this title, Why Do Professional Development, as either completely obvious, well, everybody knows why you ought to do it, or they might look at it as kind of a question that we're trying to address as in a problem-solving mode. Here are the reasons you ought to do it. And that's really not the perspective that we want to take, right, Marty? I mean, we want to look at this from kind of a different point of view.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be looking at the intersection between individual teachers and the facts of their lives, the context in which they live and work, and opportunities that come up, and how that all those pieces come together. So this is more a thought process than as a problem solving.
Yeah, one way you might think about it is what we want to do in the next 40 or so minutes is kind of explore the landscape in which you live as a teacher, you work as a teacher, and you have opportunities to do professional development. You choose to do some of those opportunities. You don't do others of those. How can we look at that whole kind of situation? As I said, call it a landscape, call it a system, whatever you want to call it. How can we think about that in a way that's really helpful to us and kind of gets us out of the box of what we ought to do and into a space where we're able to think more in a more detached or distant way about kind of what's going on and look at it from that point of view. So we thought we'd start with a question for you. And maybe we can, Sean, you can put the question up here. If we were to ask this question, why do you do professional development? And you thought you were answering that and you were talking to a fellow teacher about it. What would you say? So let's put some things in the chat so we can see kind of how you would respond to this. If you were talking to somebody you work with, maybe an administrator in your school, a colleague at another school or university, kind of what would you say if they say, so why are you doing this professional development? What are some of the answers that you might give? And Marty's going to take a look at what's kind of coming into the chats and give us a sense of how you'd respond to this. What do you see, Marty?
Well, so far we know that there's a little teeny lag. Remember, we were warned about that. So,
yeah.
So here's some of the things that people are saying is because it's interesting to do to avoid getting stuck in becoming a fossil. Teaching is a lifelong process. Learning to teach is lifelong. So you keep developing because it's important. We're talking about passion and new perspectives. So I'm seeing a lot of things, Donald, that people are talking about that are really internal motivation. Someone said it makes me feel alive. A lot of this is coming from not external forces, but from the inside out. Although somebody just mentioned that things are constantly changing, which is something that you and I are going to address.
Right.
The field is not static. It's not fossilized. So we can't become fossilized either.
Right. So it's the whole dynamism of both the field, the state of what we know in the field, and the work kind of keeps us engaged. Well, now what happens if you think about this question and you are answering it not so much as you're doing here in the context of fellow teachers, but if we could see the next slide, you're basically talking to a family member or friend or somebody who's not a teacher. Now go back to the last slide if you would. That's great. How would your answer change? Would it change? Would you say anything different about why you do professional development if you're talking to someone who's not in the work itself? What are some
while
things
we're
you might
waiting
say?
for the comments to come up, I can imagine sometimes a spouse or a parent or a friend saying, you're already doing a lot of work. Why on earth are you adding this to your mix of activities? Okay, here comes some more activities. Okay, so one person said, I do it because I love to do it, because it's me, and you get that internal kind of motivation. And once another person has said it's to be a professional or to have time to hang out with colleagues. So there's an opportunity there that perhaps doesn't happen. We know that teachers oftentimes end up feeling very isolated in their lives.
Right.
Professional development creates an opportunity for connections.
Right.
And again, we're talking about to stay mentally young, to be a better professional. Good teachers never stop learning. So it's a little bit trying to convince our loved ones that it really matters and it's really important and valuable.
And it sounds, and also to be in relationship with other teachers in a different way, as
Right.
colleagues, as peers. So, so in the next slide, we have a framework, which comes from the paper that Sarah Mercer and Chris Farrell and I did for OUP, and you can download if you haven't, in which we looked at self-directed professional development, which is what you all have been talking about. And we've heard in your answers to these questions kind of a distinction between the reason that you do it, which really relates to you yourself, because it makes you feel engaged, alive, interested in what you're doing, and then those things that relate to your context, your personal context. You do this because it's a way to stay connected with peers and friends and colleagues. And also to show your family and your greater social circle what's important to you as a teacher. And then there are also the opportunities that are available to you, like this one, for example, versus those that might be available wherever you're located geographically, physically. So one place to start in responding to this question of why do professional development is that the sources or the reasons come from different domains, if you will, and looking at how those two overlap, I think, is really is very useful. So in a way, what we want to say is not sort of the three areas themselves so much as where they overlap in that darker shaded area. In other words, how the individual relates to the context. Perhaps your school has adopted a new form of technology or a new curriculum, or you're being asked to teach a different level of student. That would be the relationship, obviously, between you as a teacher and something that's going on in your professional circumstances. Or if you look on the right-hand side, you could say, wow, there are these possibilities that are available to me that weren't available, say, in the last 2 years due to the pandemic and so on, that I really want to take advantage of. And so that really connects, if you will, you as the individual teacher with the opportunities that are available. So when we think about this, then we're really looking at a relationship between what's in you and how you connect to these opportunities and what's outside you and pulls you in or attracts you to them. So in the next slide, we kind of capture that in a very basic way when we talk about outside in and inside out. So can we have the next slide? And we'll look at that. So Marty, do you want to talk a little bit about the ideas that we had regarding this? Remember, when we were preparing this, we were thinking about a situation that might illustrate this dynamic of inside out and outside in as giving rise to the reasons for doing professional development.
Yeah, we were reflecting together on projects that we've done together and then projects that we have done individually, and just trying to come up with relevant examples of how the external and the internal come into some kind of relationship with each other. So one of the things we talked about is one organization we worked for had a kind of a rolling process. You could participate in the professional development opportunity. It was a rather large organization.
Right.
But
It
you
had,
could choose
didn't it
when.
have, it had, I think, 12, 14, 15 branches in a metropolitan area, and they were adopting a new form of teaching. And as you said, Marty, yeah, it was rolling, right?
Yeah, I mean, people could choose to participate when they wanted to participate. And there was a little bit in this particular situation of a pushback from somebody quite
A senior
a
administrator,
senior
right?
administrator.
There were three, I think there were three offerings of this training. I think you could think, and each one ran for, I think, a couple of months. And so initially, when we were setting this up, the senior administration said, well, we need to tell the teachers from this branch to go on into this training, and these branches need to attend the second training, and these the third training. And we said, no, let's not do it that way, right?
Yeah, let's let people join when it feels like it fits with their personal lives. But I think the thing we wanted to highlight, Donald, is the term that this administrator uses. Well, those people who do the third section are going to be late adopters.
They're going to be late to the training. They're going to, and in a sense, by choosing to join the third iteration, the third round of this training, they're kind of showing their level of interest or disinterest.
Right.
And so that's an outside in way of looking at why do professional development. Looking at, you have three opportunities, you get to choose. If you choose the first one, that shows you're really gung-ho, and that shows that it's really important to you. Whereas if you choose the third one, it shows just the opposite. That's an outside in perspective. But from the inside out perspective, it actually looks pretty different.
Yeah. Yeah. When you realize that people choose to join opportunities for a whole range of reasons that we can't possibly get to the bottom of in these few minutes, but you can even think for yourselves of reasons why you do or don't do something. And I wanted to share just an example from another project where people were coming at different times in to do some kind of professional development. And what we began to notice is that people who came later were actually up to speed already. They'd been hearing their colleagues talk about this innovation. They had been seeing it in practice in classrooms. So rather than being late adopters, they actually kind of came in ahead of the curve a little bit.
Right, which I think, and that's a really key idea, that when we think about from the outside in, that when you elect or choose to participate in professional development is somehow an indication of your level of interest, we're looking at things as very static, as very, that the institution is static, the training is static, and you're joining it. It's like you're getting on a train that's parked at the station at the front, in the middle, or at the end, but actually it's a moving train. And so, as Marty said, what happens is, of course, teachers around you are learning from what's going on. This is part of what's going on in your branch. There's talk in the teacher's room. Students are reacting. So by the time you participate in that training, perhaps because you had to sign up for the third iteration for personal reasons, because you didn't have transportation, because family demands, whatever, by the time you sign up, the reality is you actually know a fair amount about what's going on, which those who signed up in the first round don't know. So I think our main point about outside in, inside out is that it is both a relationship between these two perspectives or dynamics, but it's something that happens constantly and in time. And it isn't something that we can just look at and make a judgment about at one point in time. I think we said it's kind of like, what's that saying about stepping in the river?
Same stream twice, right? The river's constantly flowing. So recognizing the incredibly dynamic aspect of our lives, of our schools, of our communities, of our classrooms, and what we're ready to learn at a given point in time is also in flux. What ideas am I ready for? So I think we could go on to the next slide, and I'm going to tell a little story about our organization, or an organization that I worked for deciding to change platforms, and I bet you many of you had a similar experience.
You mean online platforms, teaching
Yes,
platforms?
online
Oh.
platforms as the pandemic
No.
descended, and all of a sudden we had within many of us had within a very short amount of time the need to adopt an online platform to start teaching. And this is kind of this image is a cycle of kind of the steps that one goes through. But my experience is it felt like there was a fire hose coming at me as a teacher. I was needing to begin teaching, today, and I'm still learning a platform that is very complicated and has many, many aspects to it. So there's a million different things that you can do with this platform. And I'm just drowning. I'm drowning in trying to figure it out and making so many mistakes because I didn't really
Right.
understand what I was doing. Donald had a slightly different experience.
Right. No, I mean, I so feel for you. I just really, yeah. I mean, like so many of us, when things changed in March 2020, I was in the middle of teaching a course, and literally between our meeting on Thursday and our meeting the following Thursday, the university went online, and we had to figure out. I had very little experience teaching online, and I had to figure out how to do this, and there were some resources that were there, but the university and the School of Education took an interestingly, I won't say hands off, but they stood back. And the person who led the ed tech team in the School of Education, who was just brilliant, she would send out kind of every morning links to one or two ideas that you might try. And so when she got a sense of where you were at, then you almost got in your mailbox this customized, well, you're doing this on the platform. What if you added that? And so what she was doing was really doing that old idea from which we know from Stephen Krashen from the 1980s, I+1. I was doing my I, and the ed tech person was giving me the +1. So really what you could see in my experience, unlike Marty's, is how this diagram really played out. I was thinking about my current situation and thinking, it would be good if I knew how to, for example, put people into groups ahead of time so I don't have to spend the time doing that when we're actually live. And so I would look for a link, or I would contact the person in ed tech. She would give me the link. That would be step 3. And I would learn how to do it, try it out, see how it worked. And we get through the cycle in that way. So I think what we see in our contrasting experiences is really how important individual decision-making, agency, and choice really is in this process. And that even when we are told we need to do some form of professional development, this is training you must participate in, that doesn't really disguise the fact that underlying it all, as you all said in the chat earlier in the session, it really starts with you and what you want to do and what you feel you need to do. Or put another way, everything that you encounter in professional development filters through or is mediated by what you understand and what you feel you need. So that really, I think, takes us to another image that we want to put up now and talk about really how that interaction of what's available and what you choose plays out. So this is an image that comes from a book that I just finished on professional development, and grows out of that project that Sean talked about in the introduction, the Learning for Teaching project, where we looked at the experiences of public sector English language teachers in Chile, Turkey, and Qatar. And we were trying to understand in these different policy environments, the choices that teachers were making and the decisions they were making about participating in professional development. And what came out, which was really, I think, an important insight, on one level is kind of totally obvious, but on another level is one that we don't actually pay attention to. We actually have 3 basic elements going on in any professional development. We have what's being offered. That's the email you get telling you this is available. That's the poster you see in the teacher's room. That's the fact the conference comes up annually and you're looking at what it's going to be. That's the offering. The event then happens in a particular time, in a particular space. So that's the what, the when, the where, the how. And obviously, those circumstances, as Marty and I were just saying in our examples, changed dramatically when we moved so much of our world into this virtual space. But nonetheless, a virtual event has all these circumstances. That's why Katie was saying you have 48 hours to sign up for the certificate. In other words, that represents the event. Now, each of you are in this event, and you are taking various things from it. So the event is a learning opportunity that different people will pull from and learn from in different ways. And so when we put those three elements, offering, event, and learning opportunity together, what we have that we take from it is the experience.
Yeah. So, for example, when you attend a conference, or you could even use, we'll look back on this example before we wind up today, but think about going to a conference.
A face-to-face conference, right?
Yeah, face-to-face. Remember those. I think they've come. I think they've come back into vogue again.
Right. I love them.
Where you would get the conference bulletin. You'd start to circle sessions that you wanted to go to. You try to make yourself a schedule. So these are the offerings. And then the idea, can you get to the event? What's involved with getting there? What's it going to be like to be present? And then you and Donald and I and 14 other people might be in the same session. And when we talk about what we got from it afterwards, we're going to find vast differences. There's also the truth that I think we all experience at those kinds of face-to-face conferences, is that so much happens in between the sessions.
Yeah, in the space between.
Donald and I have a colleague who used to say, you should schedule a 45-minute session followed by a 45-minute break, followed by another session, because so much happens in the space in between that is a little hard to nail down, but it's absolutely part of the learning opportunity that has happened in the experience of attending that conference.
So maybe this is a good time to we've been doing a lot of kind of talking, maybe see if folks have questions they want to ask about, particularly this way we're kind of teasing apart what a professional development activity is, that it has this offering dimension, it happens, that's the event, and then different people take different things from it. That's the learning opportunity. Right. Questions people may have about that, because I think as people are entering their questions, and Marty's kind of keeping an eye on them, it's the old thing that, as Marty said, you go to a session and you end up having this really interesting conversation with the person you're sitting next to, or the person you're standing behind waiting to pick up coffee, or the person you ask, where are the restrooms, whatever. It's people that you interact with. Those are part of the learning opportunities, not simply the content that the offering advertises and that the event promotes. It's all of those things that actually contribute to the experience. And what's interesting, before we take some of your kind of questions on this, is when we looked across the studies in these three national contexts of Chile and Turkey and Qatar, between 80 and 90% of the teachers that we contacted through these national surveys, and we were surveying ELT teachers in each of those countries, so there were massive numbers of replies, 80 to 90% said that they found professional development useful. Well, I think what we misunderstand in that figure is that use is not just what the offering was. Use is what happened in the learning opportunity. What did I get from it? And it might have been something different than what was intended. So, Marty, what do we got? Have we got some?
Well, so far, I'm seeing a lot of people basically agreeing with what you're saying.
I love it.
And we have a lot of commentary from people just saying that for them, face-to-face, and perhaps we're just thirstier for face-to-face because of our experience, with not being face-to-face. So people are saying webinars are fine, but I want to get back in touch with people. There's a question here that I don't understand, and maybe you do, Donald. I'm just going to take a gander and put it out. What's the role of TPAC in professional development? Do you know what TPAC is?
Yeah, TPCK. Is an acronym, like so many, and it's for technological or technology pedagogical content knowledge. So very briefly, the idea of pedagogical content knowledge, which was first proposed by Lee Schulman in the 1990s, is the idea that the knowledge that teachers have actually is a function of what they do in the circumstances of their teaching. And it is actually something that is literally crafted out of the time and space in which they're working with particular students. So that's the pedagogy and the content.
Somebody did come in with a counterpoint saying, I like online learning. That it works for me. And that's an interesting question, because I think that is also my experience. I'm currently teaching a course that's an online course, and I know that people are busy. They have full-time jobs, they've got families. There's all kinds of reasons why online works well. So we're getting a little bit of back and forth around that.
And I don't think it's an either or. I think, as we're going to say in just a minute, one of the things that online or virtual professional development offers is a much more equitable and accessible form of professional development than face-to-face. So while we love both and benefit from both, they create different kinds of learning opportunities. And I think that's really very important. But just going back to the TPAC comment, I think what we've seen over the last 2 years, that in fact, we've been able to create professional development, as the wonderful folks at OUP have done with this, that make it very accessible and very useful, even if you're not particularly technologically skilled. And so where TPAC used to be, I think, a barrier, I would say it's increasingly less so. But so let's then, if we can, just go on a bit to this idea of how we pull together these three elements of what's offered, the event as it happens, and the learning opportunity. And we look at them from 2 points of view. So maybe we could put up the next slide, which gives us another kind of diagram to look at and to think with. So in this diagram, what you have, just take a minute to kind of digest it, because there's a bunch on it, a bunch of information. As you look at it, on the left-hand side, you have information or a way of looking at who's offering the professional development. We could call that the provider. And so what we have, the provider creates an offering. ELTOC is an offering. IATEFL is an offering. A conference is an offering. A course is an offering. And there's a topic of that offering. In this case, our topic is professional development. And the way it's set up makes it available. So the term we use for the left-hand box is the availability of the offering. Then on the right-hand side, we have you, the participants, and we have the reasons that you might be participating, how we started our session, and whether or not it feels like it's something you should be part of. That's about access. And those things go together to create the event. So let me give you an example on the right-hand side. One of the things that I think many of us have experienced, I remember as a beginning teacher, I experienced, is be sitting in a faculty meeting. I was a high school teacher, and the principal would announce some kind of professional development that was being offered in the district. And it sounded kind of interesting. But I was a first-year teacher, and I wasn't sure whether I could volunteer and say I'd like to go, or I needed to wait for the more senior teachers to volunteer or say that they were interested, because there are only a limited number of places. So that would be how I perceived access. Am I able to go? Is it accessible for me? So what we see then is that in a virtual world, access is much more expanded. Whereas in a face-to-face world, you might want to go to a professional development event, but you don't have transportation, or the scheduling doesn't work with your second shift job, your job with your family, your role as a parent, or it's just scheduled in such a way that the time overlaps with other things that you also have to do. That's all about access. So by having these ideas of on the one hand, availability from the point of view of what's being offered, and access from the point of view of those who are participating, we see that the learning opportunity is actually shaped by how those two things come together. Right. So, yeah, Marty, did you want to pick up on this? I mean, it takes us back to our earlier example, doesn't it? I just
want to chime in, because I think that is a really important point of that, is that you might have, like the administrator we referred to earlier, feeling like people who come late to the game in the third offering are somehow late bloomers,
Right.
are less interested, are less motivated. And the reason might be completely different why
Yes.
they didn't attend. So I think Donald's example of, I'm a junior teacher. Should I be taking one of the slots?
Hmm.
So I think that it's what we realize is that what the offering is, oftentimes it's provided by perhaps the district, your provincial educational department, or whatever the case may be. And their view is, we're offering this awesome thing that you must be excited about.
Right.
But access might not, for the reasons that Donald said and many others, it might not be accessible to you in the same way that the provider feels it is.
Right. And so, I mean, we certainly have examples of that. Again, in the Learning for Teaching national studies, we found in one national context, the ministry had moved over the period of a decade to announcing professional development offerings online on a particular website that was available only to public sector teachers. And over time, teachers got used to looking there, seeing what was there, and they could sign up. And these were actually face-to-face offerings in their local area, but they were publicized by the ministry through this website. In another country, they took a different approach. And what they did was essentially to send circulars to the local education authority, the local folks in charge of the schools, and saying, here's a list of workshops of professional development that's available. Please send it out to schools. So by the time it got to teachers, it had gone through the local education authority, probably the principal or the vice principal of the school. Maybe it was printed out and posted. Maybe it was emailed out to people, and then people could sign up. So availability and access, that dynamic, that dance, that what we came to call the double helix, the two arrows that you saw there, is really part of how we think about shaping professional development and why do it, and what our reasons are, and how our reasons fit with what's available or what's offered.
I just want to chime in one more comment that's been over here in the comment thread, Donald.
Yeah.
And that's a couple of people have mentioned something that's very kind of obvious, but perhaps we haven't brought up, and that is cost.
Yes.
Is there a cost, and who's bearing the cost of participating in that event? Is it paid for by some entity, the ministry, et cetera, or are you having to do it yourself?
Exactly. And if you don't talk about cost, then you're not talking about equity in the access side of that slide. What you're really doing is saying, well, we're not even going to think about that. We're just going to say making the offering available means you should go to it, whereas cost can be an enormous hurdle. So when we go back to this idea of what makes access more equitable, cost is absolutely a part of it, as is, I think, the way in which the offering, the scheduling, the event fits into our lives. So as much as we want to do professional development, these other factors absolutely come into the mix. And so the reason that I wanted to push this way of thinking of inside out and outside in is because so often the narrative that I hear when I'm talking to institutions or ministry folks or whatever is, teachers are not taking advantage of what we're offering. We're offering this stuff and they're not doing it. And they ought to do it because it's good, it's important, it relates to our curriculum, to our use of technology, whatever. And I would say, well, we have to back up here. You're talking about the offering and you're talking about how accessible you think it is. But you also have to look at how available it is. But actually, when you look at it from the participant's point of view, you have to ask yourself how accessible it is. Is it? Does the schedule work? Does the cost work? Does the topic actually relate to the needs that they have? So when we think about the double helix, the learning opportunity actually comes from those two things weaving together.
Yeah.
You were going to say something, I could see, Marty.
No, absolutely. I was just thinking, because I was going to say and agree with you that cost is not just how much you have to spend to participate. Right. There's so many other costs. Yeah. Does it mean you have to find a place for your children to stay while you participate? And this is even true in the virtual environment.
Yes,
people
absolutely.
Have to figure things out to make
it
work.
Right.
Yeah, so it's bigger than that. Good, thank you.
Good. So as we kind of wrap up, because I think we're heading toward our last 5 or so minutes, and we want to have some time if people have comments or questions. Maybe we'll just turn to this question of access and availability in a virtual environment. And I think that was just basically what was on our last slide there. But before we do, we have an image we wanted to share with you of how this double helix kind of looks. So you're probably familiar with this as a visual, what do we call it? A visual illusion. You know, what is it? Can you see the two faces? Can you see the glass or the goblet that separates them?
And what's interesting, when I look at this, I see that I flash in between them. I see the goblet for a minute, and then I see the two faces. And so, yes, we realize that it's both. It's both what is accessible, what's been made available, and what you're able to address.
Access.
So we can't see it simplistically. We have to see it with all its complexity in order to be able to figure out what we need to be doing around professional development.
So I guess what we're saying, no surprise, having spent almost 40 minutes saying it, is that the answer or our answer to why do professional development is it's a bit more complicated than just because I want to. It's both having to do with what is available, and we've just been talking about that, but it's also a function of what you feel is accessible to you. And we've talked about accessibility in terms of cost and schedule and so on, but it also could be how many times, I mean, I've gone to sessions, for example, at a research conference, and it's way over my head. It's literally not accessible to me in terms of what I know and my experience. So accessibility is made up of lots of things. And I think when we look at the black glass between the two faces, what we're looking at how it's a way of capturing the idea that the interaction of what's available and what's accessible actually creates that learning opportunity in the center.
Yeah, and you know what also is interesting, Donald, and we do want to take just this last couple of minutes. We're wanting to say, what is your headline that you would take away from these 40 minutes thinking about this, the complexity of professional development? What's the takeaway? What is something you're going to
chew on, think about, say to somebody,
about, or talk to people about at your school? So I'm seeing the word gestalt. I'm seeing the word accessibility. Somebody's talking about it. First, they see the goblet, then they see the two faces. So that the idea of
the back and forth,
in between. What else are you sort of going to be thinking about or talking about as a result?
You know, as people are kind of giving you some thoughts in the chat, Marty, I thought a way to kind of bring us together is if we think about the ideas we've put out, that when we take professional development, we can see it as an offering, an event, and together they create a learning opportunity, and that the offering is structured around how it's available, and that creates the event, and the learning opportunity really reflects how participants feel, how accessible they feel it is. If we put what we've just done in that context, we put ELTOC in that context, it's really quite exciting because you think about it, ELTOC creates an offering that is very rich and widely available. They make it available in so many different ways, not just what we're doing live, but later it will be archived so people can get back to it. So they even kind of, if you will, they break apart time. It's not just now, but it's over time. And then if you think about then accessibility, well, people can come to this and spend the time they want to spend, be online with us as much or little as they want to, comment in the chat as much or as little as they want to. All of that is really very much under the control of the individual. So it takes us back to the fact that individual agency is absolutely central to why we do professional development. But if we think it's only about what we want and what we do, we miss out on that other side, the other face, if you will, of the two, because we also have to look at what's available in the landscape. So I don't know if people had any closing comments or questions.
Things about people making some nice comments about being motivated and excited and interested. and a lot of people talking. Still kind of the debate going on about, is online better than face to face? And the answer is no. Everything's better. Hi, Sean.
Hi, no, I was laughing at what you're saying, Marty. Yeah, I mean, you really did start a discussion on whether online or face to face is better. There, I don't know if that was one of your unintentional aims, but well done. I mean, I don't think I think in terms of a back channel going on during a talk, I don't think I've seen one quite as divided as that. So,
but Sean, could I just? I know we need to wind up, but I think the energy that attracts really illustrates this point. We're talking about the dynamic between availability and accessibility.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and I think it's quite interesting because what I find interesting from a really different point of view is that this is the session that's had the fewest amount of questions submitted, but probably the biggest amount of back channel. And when you're talking about the energy, the focus has gone on the people are really looking at and dissecting what you're saying and basically that way, which I found, from me as an online point of view, I found really interesting. So that's what was going on.
And and the other thing is that back channeling is really a wonderful thing, that virtual conferences allow us to see how the learning opportunity is unfolding, which otherwise it's a lot of thought bubbles when you're in a room. What are people thinking,
No, for me, I mean, like my answer is always online, and this is one of the reasons I think that if you can manage the back channel while you're talking and things like that, it just brings a whole new dynamic to sessions like this.
Right. Absolutely.
And I have to say,
thank you for your wonderful thoughts.
I have to say thank you to you. I think one of the things that just blew me away there, apart from the session content, which I found fascinating, and that double helix model that you were talking about at the end, it was just like, oh yeah, why? That's such an interesting and easy way to encapsulate what you're saying. But more than that, I just love the way you put it together. The way you can tell you two have worked together. There was such a lovely back and flow forward between you both, and I really appreciated that. It was fabulous to listen to and
thank you.
With it.
Really, really wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a great opportunity for us.
I think the audience is thoroughly agreeing with that. Lots of great talks, and thank you with it. And really, you can see on the screen, Marcus has said it's really enriching. I think it's one of those now that I would go to my little coffee break talking about. Need that second session to come back and unpick everything of all the themes that we've had over coffee. But thank you so much, Marty. Thank you so much, Donald. What a great way to end this block. I will take you off screen now, and you're free to obviously go. So thank you so much.
Thanks to everyone for being part of this around the world. Yes, it's been great.
Have a great day.
Thank you, Sean.
Wow, I mean, professional development's my thing, so I really get into it. But that was just an amazing talk. I hope you all really enjoyed it. There's so much in there. That's not to say I found all the talks fascinating today. So as usual, ELTOC always brings together some magnificent speakers and gives us some valuable insight into the English language teaching profession. It makes me go away now and think about that and apply that to my practice. So thank you to all the speakers. And can you believe we are almost at the end of the block? I mean, where does time go? There's we have been here since 12 hour time, but 3 hours or so ago, and we've had a marvelous talk. We've had the talk on self-regulated learning. We've had the talk on ChatGPT. I know we just finished on why do professional development, and what a great block. But the time has come for us to come to the end. As I said, I think we've had lots of knowledge, lots of expertise. We've also behind the scenes, which you can never see apart from you see Katie and I, but you never see the great work all the moderators are doing behind the scenes. We have so many people working to make the event go as smoothly as possible. So a big thank you to those people for all their help, all their making the event go so smoothly. So as we get to the end, let me remind you one more time about the certificate. I'm under pressure to get this right. The QR code over there is where you can go if you want all the links for all the sessions. But if you want to get a certificate, as we've got it on the screen now, you need to register and click on the link that will come through the channels or in the QR code and register your desire for a certificate by Monday morning. As I said at the beginning of this last session, there's a lot of traffic going on at the moment to those links. So if you do click through and you might find it's a bit slow, just be patient. It will go through eventually. There are thousands of people that do join ELTOC every session, every block that we do. And if everybody's clicking through at the same time, it does create a traffic jam. So do be patient with it. And of course, ELTOC is wrapping up for us. Block 1 is wrapping up for us, but at 01:45 UTC time, Universal time, we will start ELTOC Block 2, and the team over there will be bringing you 3 more sessions. So starting at 01:45 UTC, we can find out about empowering students with innovative AI tools. That will be followed by a talk of working with Generation Alpha. And then they will finish with Robin and Gemma talking about 5 vowel letters and 20 vowel sounds. Lots to say. That's an intriguing title for a talk, isn't it? So if you want to join in Block 2, then do go to the program, go to the link at the ELTOC program. You'll see what time it starts. You don't need to sign up because we are obviously on social media, and you can just join in with it. So you can go over there. Set an alarm clock if you're like me, set a reminder to join in with the session that are taking place in Block 2 of this ELTOC. But Block 1 is coming to an end. So before, we're going to put a video on as an outro, but before I click on the closing video, I just want to remind you of some of the ways that you can continue to connect, learn, and grow with ELTOC and Oxford University Press. So, I mean, we always see that ELTOC is a great way for us all to connect. I'm always amazed every time we do it. Thousands of people, thousands of educators from around the world coming together. And I think Oxford University Press, is very good at making this network of like-minded educators. So if you want to continue, then you can sign up to the waiting list for future events. And secondly, you can subscribe to the social media channels. I presume you're on one of those now. So make sure you subscribe, and then you'll see and hear when future sessions are coming up. So if you want to make an inquiry or simply if you want to find out about that, that's where you go. Finally, if you want to find out more about an OUP product or make an inquiry, contact your local team or educational consultants, and they will be able to help you. So I encourage you to click on the links that you'll find in almost got it wrong, in the QR code, or going through the media now, and you'll be able to make your query and everything there. And that's it for me. ELTOC is about to come to an end from Block 1 purpose. Go stretch your legs. You've got something like 12 hours or so until Block 2 begins. If you're going to Block 2, I hope you enjoy it. I'll be watching it on recording, and I will see you next time. Goodbye for now, and enjoy the rest of your day.
At Oxford University Press, we know that your work as an English language teacher evolves constantly. So to support and empower your teaching, we offer a variety of professional development opportunities designed for you and informed by your collective teaching experiences. Our materials are underpinned by research and cover a range of topics and methodologies and are available 24/7. We support you so you can be the best teacher that you can be. Connect, learn, grow.
Whatever your students want to read and whatever their level of English, the Oxford Reading Club Digital Library will have the perfect range of e-books for them. Oxford Reading Club. The best stories make the best readers.
Language is more than words on a page. It's how we express ourselves, how we share ideas. Learning English opens the door to new opportunities, new perspectives, new people.
Oh, sorry, that's for you.
No worries. Every tiny step forward is part of something bigger, something better. The moments when you get it right. Moments when it takes all you've got. Moments when you connect. When you dream. When you grow.
Hi.
Hi. When you find the words.
I'm nervous, but it's like, you know.